more than 23,000 illegal weapons have been seized so far during this current administration. Of those 23,000 weapons, approximately 80% are of North American origin. As has already been mentioned here, when speaking about the general strategy, more than 23,000 illegal weapons have been seized so far during this current administration. Of those 23,000 weapons, approximately 80% are of North American origin. So, in this specific case, it is roughly the same proportion as before.
Correct. General, taking advantage of the fact that you have the floor, the statement mentioned the collaboration of the United States in terms of intelligence. To be more precise, where does the collaboration with the U.S. government begin and where does it end?
Collaboration with the United States government has been taking place for a long time. During this administration, the relationship has been greatly strengthened. There has been an exchange of information and data with Northern Command. It is a very important flow of information. And that is also exactly how we arrived at this specific case while collaborating extensively with various U.S. authorities. The locating of the area and so on was carried out by military intelligence personnel. There was other information that was provided to us by the United States federal authorities. Here we acknowledge their dedicated work, that comprehensive national security strategy with results reported here every 15 days. They have successfully achieved more than 43,000 arrests, seized over 23,000 dangerous weapons, and secured more than 320 tons of illicit drugs. Thank you very much. Methamphetamine laboratories and production centers, more than 2,200. If I remember correctly, that's the number to date. All of this is the result of a strategy that was implemented starting October 1st. You are all well aware of the 4 pillars. Effectively addressing the root causes, this is absolutely vital and essential for our long-term success. It shows how organized crime is finding it increasingly and significantly more challenging to recruit young people. This is a very important indicator that this first pillar of the strategy is currently functioning exactly as intended. The second pillar, which involves the comprehensive strengthening and reinforcement of the National Guard, it is a gradual and time-consuming process, as it is very complicated to have a large organization of this nature completely organized and fully structured, but it is steadily being achieved and substantial and highly significant progress is being made. The third pillar, intelligence. What we just mentioned is intelligence and prosecution. And the fourth, coordination. These last two are carried out at the national level, but they have also been implemented with other countries, in this case with the United States. So that is essentially how this continuous flow of information has consistently functioned, and the strategy is definitely exceptionally effective.
Well, regarding the operation that was carried out yesterday, by way of background, I can tell you that Ruben N., also known as El Mencho, head of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, began his involvement in drug trafficking in the 1990s in Michoacán as a member of the Valencia Group or the Millennium Cartel. Since that time, he has already started to be considered a significant target. Subsequently, in May 2016, the United States added him to its list of most wanted fugitives, and he was wanted by a court in the Western District of Texas. In August 2018, the Attorney General's office offered a reward of 30 million pesos for information leading to the capture of El Mencho. In December 2024, the United States government offered $15 million for information leading to the capture of this individual. With Central Military Intelligence and additional information from the institutions of the Security Cabinet, as well as from United States institutions, the Secretariat of National Defense tracked El Mencho's network of connections until the conditions were right to plan an operation for his arrest. As you all know very well, the intelligence process is very complicated and requires a lot of time. It requires gathering a great deal of information, many data points, and numerous clues from various sources, both national and international. Mexico has agreements even with other countries and organizations such as Interpol and Europol, among others. We, as the armed forces, have greatly strengthened our relationship with the United States Northern Command, and that exchange of information is extremely important. On February 20th, through Central Military Intelligence Operations, a trusted associate of one of Mencho's romantic partners was located, who transported her to a facility in the town of Tapalpa, Jalisco. At that location, this romantic partner met with Mencho, and on February 21st, she left the property and information was obtained that Mencho, he remained at that location. He stayed there with a security circle. On the same February 21st, the operation planning was carried out. It is doctrinal, it is an axiom of military operations that are conducted. For those carried out by the armed forces around the world, the one who executes the operation must be the one to plan it. In this case, it was the Special Forces personnel and the Immediate Reaction Special Force personnel of the National Guard who planned the operation. That same day, an operational force was organized, made up of 3 components: a ground unit, which consisted of personnel from the Joint Special Force, Army Special Forces, and the Immediate Reaction Special Force of the National Guard, as I mentioned. There was also an airmobile force made up of 6 helicopters and Special Forces personnel. This force would head to the area of operations in order to maintain secrecy, and with this, achieve surprise, take the initiative, and achieve surprise. They did not arrive in Jalisco. This force was under orders, on alert in certain locations in states neighboring Jalisco. And a third component was this specialized military force provided crucial air support, using versatile Texan aircraft from the Mexican Air Force during the mission. Once it was officially confirmed, on the night of February 22nd, that is to say, during the late hours when Mencho's actual presence was fully corroborated, it was the specialized ground force that finally moved out to the location, to the place where he was located in order to carry out the arrest. If a perimeter is to be set up, El Mencho has 2 arrest warrants for organized crime. So it was going to be a cordon. We had information, of course, from the aerial platforms that the personnel were armed, so I was going to apply the federal firearms and explosives control law to stop them, also caught in the act. Then it moves. At this point, the security personnel working for Mencho opened fire directly on the military personnel who were stationed at the scene. After the confrontation, Mencho leaves the scene, leaving behind a group equipped with a large amount of high-caliber weaponry. It was truly a brutal and violent attack, systematically carried out by both organized crime personnel and the elite Special Forces military personnel. Despite the intensity of the assault, they successfully repelled the action. They died there. In total, 8 criminals. Yesterday it was reported that there had been 4, because that was the preliminary information we had at the time. As you well know, after the operations are finished, the entire area is then inspected and 4 more bodies were found. 7 long guns and 2 rocket launchers were seized. Of the rocket launchers, one was an RPG type and the other a blindicide. The RPG is a Russian rocket launcher, which, by the way, was the one used in 2015 to bring down an Air Force helicopter in the area of Outland de Navarro, specifically during an operation that had been set up to capture this criminal, was brought down. 8 vehicles were also seized, including 2 ATVs, as well as cartridges and magazines. El Mencho and his close circle fled and took refuge in a wooded area. This cabin complex was located on the outskirts of Tapalpa. So, adjacent to it was a wooded area, and that's where El Mencho and his close circle headed. A perimeter is established and they are pursued. The Special Forces operatives eventually locate him hiding deep among the dense undergrowth. They immediately begin to open fire on the Special Forces operatives. They were carrying rocket launchers as well, but due to the pressure from the military action, they didn't use the rocket launchers, fortunately. However, a helicopter from an airmobile force was hit. This helicopter was forced to make an emergency landing at a nearby military facility in Sayula, Jalisco. That's where this helicopter landed. Fortunately, no military personnel were injured in this action. Subsequently, the military personnel repelled the attack. El Mencho was wounded along with 2 of his bodyguards, and 2 criminals were arrested. More. Yesterday, as reported in the press release, 3 long guns, 2 handguns, a rocket launcher, grenades, magazines, and cartridges were seized. There, unfortunately, a soldier was wounded during the intense conflict. In the first action I mentioned, at the cabins as well. 2 soldiers were wounded there. Once the situation was under control, military health personnel went to the place where Mencho and his security circle were, along with his 2 wounded bodyguards. They determined that it was necessary to evacuate them as they were in very serious condition. Support from a helicopter is requested so it can land and transport them to a medical facility in Jalisco. Mencho, his 2 bodyguards, and the wounded officer are transported. Unfortunately, he died on the way. Because of this, it is decided at that moment that the helicopter should head to the Morelia International Airport in Michoacan, where a fighter jet from the Air Force is stationed. Upon their arrival at the location, they are immediately transferred to the waiting fighter jet, and that jet quickly heads directly toward Mexico City. This strategic decision was officially made because it was no longer considered advisable or safe to travel to Guadalajara, especially due to the significant risk that this dangerous criminal group could potentially carry out even more violent and unpredictable actions against the public. There, in the capital of Jalisco, in addition to this operation, with Central Military Intelligence, information was also obtained that Hugo H., alias El Tuli, who was the logistical and financial operator and Mencho's main trusted person, was in El Grullo, Jalisco. From there, he was coordinating blockades on the roads, the burning of vehicles, attacks on military installations, the National Guard, as well as businesses, government facilities, and so on. And he was also offering 20,000 pesos for each soldier killed to all the members of this criminal group. An airmobile unit of special forces from the Paratrooper Rifle Brigade is deployed. They locate him in El Grullo. He tries to escape in a vehicle, begins to attack the military personnel. They respond to the aggression, and this alleged criminal dies there. A long gun and a handgun are secured from him. He was carrying 7,200,000 pesos and 965,000 US dollars, cartridges, magazines, and the vehicle. The detainees and the items seized were placed at the disposal of the Specialized Prosecutor's Office for Organized Crime of the Attorney General's Office. Yesterday, more military personnel were deployed. By the afternoon, everything was returning to normal. The blockades were not increasing, but it was decided anyway. To strengthen the presence of military personnel, special forces were sent on 3 Mexican Air Force planes. And they will also be concentrated. They have been gathering since last night and will continue to do so today. More military personnel from the center of the country and also from the states neighboring Jalisco, in order to total 2,500 troops as reinforcements. There were already military units stationed in Jalisco. About 7,000 troops, so it will be reinforced. The intention is, above all, to have a deterrent effect with the presence of this personnel. First, I would like to take this solemn opportunity to offer my deepest condolences to the grieving families of our dedicated colleagues who tragically lost their lives. We also want to give recognition to our military personnel who carried out a successful operation. It can be viewed from many perspectives, but it is clear that they fulfilled their mission. And what was demonstrated? The strength of the Mexican state. There is no doubt about that. Thank you.